Hey everybody, welcome to Preaching Donkey. Today I have a confession to make. I am not naturally a good listener, not at all. And this is something that I've really had to work on to become a better listener. And I'm going to talk about why being a good listener helps your preaching. This is Preaching Donkey, and we are all about helping preachers communicate better. So hit that subscribe button, like, give a comment. If this is helpful in any way, then give us some love, because we want more than anything to help you preach with more confidence and more effectiveness than you've ever preached with before. Listening, let's talk about it. Early on in my marriage, I had a little bit of an argument with my wife. It was a friendly argument, but it was an argument where she told me, she said, you have kind of got this thing that you do where you go into preacher voice. And I said, what's preacher voice? And she said, well, when we're talking, sometimes if you're passionate about a topic, or if you want to be heard, you will just start sermonizing. You'll just start giving a mini sermon, and your voice changes like you're giving a sermon, which I try not to use preacher voice when I preach, but apparently when I'm in these conversations, at least early on in my marriage, I would go into this thing called preacher voice. And she felt like, and admittedly she was right, that I wasn't listening to her in those moments. I was just waiting for her to finish talking so I could speak and give my opinion. And I know this is not good, but this is just where I was. So I've really had to work on how to listen to other people, because it's so important. Now, for you and for me, when we preach, the result of not being a good listener when we preach is pretty dire, because if you don't listen to people, you don't really know them. And if you don't know them, then you can't communicate with them. You can't preach in a way that they experience something that they need. You're just speaking theory. You're speaking really to yourself. You're speaking to your needs. You're not really speaking to the needs of people. And so you want to learn the skill of listening. So I want to give you 3 very quick tips about how you and I can become much better listeners in our marriages and much better listeners of people, so that when we preach, it's a much better experience for everybody, and we're better at communicating what people actually need. Number 1, ask more questions. It's that simple. Just ask people questions. Show a genuine interest in what people are going through and their lives, and ask the questions. That's number 1. Number 2, and this is very important, pause long enough to hear an answer. Now, this is really, really important, because what we have a tendency to do, especially those of us who preach and teach and give people content, we have a tendency to ask rhetorical questions. We'll ask a question that we really want to give the answer to. So in conversation, typically, we'll ask a question knowing that we really want to give the answer. Now, if you're not a preacher and you stumbled onto this, you're going to say, wow, preachers are terrible. Well, maybe, but really what it is we just have a heart to share content. We have a heart to teach. We have a heart to guide and lead people. The word pastor literally means shepherd, okay? So sometimes we're asking people questions to get them to think, so that we can lead them in the best direction. But in a conversation, the problem with that is, if we ask a question and then give the answer, then it's really not going to be that effective. I went to a job interview one time where I was asked questions, and this is typical in a job interview. People ask you questions. The difference in this job interview was the guy would ask me a question, and then he would give me the answer to that question, and then he would tell me how much he liked the answer that he gave me to his question. And so in about an hour-long interview, I never even answered a single question, but he left feeling pretty good about my answers because he gave them to me. You don't want to do that in conversation. You want to ask questions and then pause long enough so that the person can actually give a response to your question. Don't answer the question for them, but just listen. Number 3, and this is really important, listen well enough to give meaningful feedback. Listen well enough to give meaningful feedback. And the reason why this is so important is because typically what we have a tendency to do is just listen long enough to figure out what we're going to say, right? How we're going to respond. What is the rebuttal to that? What is the answer to that? And so we're really listening not to what they're actually saying, to what they're actually feeling, to what they're actually thinking. We're listening for them to stop so that we can step in and give our opinion. And that's not really listening, that's sermonizing. That's where the preacher voice comes in. That's where all you want to do is just tell me what to think. And so in conversation, here's what we need to understand as preachers. If we learn the skill in conversation of asking better questions, pausing long enough to actually get an answer, and then listening well enough to give meaningful feedback, here's what that's going to do for us when we stand up to preach. We're going to stand up to preach with a lot more empathy for where people actually are, for a deeper understanding of what's going on in real lives. We're going to stand up there with a knowledge of the people in front of us, or at least a sample set that really represents the larger audience that we're speaking to in our church. And that's really going to help us be so much more effective at broadening the application and making sure that we're not just speaking in a vacuum and we're not just speaking in kind of a circle to ourselves, but we're speaking with and to and for the people around us. And that starts with listening. And so ask better questions, pause long enough for people to actually give an answer, and then listen well enough to give meaningful feedback. I've been working on this. I'm not perfect at it. I don't even know if I'm good at it. I'm just telling you, I have made a concerted effort to change in this area, both in my marriage and in my preaching. And so I wanted to share this with you so that hopefully it can help you as well in your preaching. Stay tuned for more videos of God Can Speak Through a Donkey. Like we always say, He can speak through you and He can speak through me. Hit that subscribe button, give a comment. What are some other ways that we can listen better as preachers, and how can that help us when we stand up to preach and deliver messages to the people that are in front of us? Don't forget to subscribe as well, and we'll see you next time.